What's up, everyone? James Lynch here. This is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to be previewing the UFC 276 featherweight title fight between Max Holloway and champion Alex Volkanovski. It's going to be in the co-main event. This is going to be taking place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas as part of International Fight Week. And if you missed it already, I've already done a preview of the Sean O'Malley-Pedro Munoz fight on this card too, so check for that on this playlist. But before I give you my preview and give you my pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. I put content on here almost every single day, so if you hit that notification bell, you won't miss any updates. And also, hitting the like and subscribe button really helps out this channel. It's a small little favor I ask at the beginning of every one of these videos. Okay, let's get into it. UFC 276, T-Mobile Arena, bigger cage, Las Vegas, as part of International Fight Week. And you can see there the co-main event, Alex Volkanovski, Max Holloway. And let's get into the champion, Alexander Volkanovski. We're going to start there first. As you can see, Alex Volkanovski, 24-1 record. He's got 12 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, and 9 by decision. He's the current featherweight champion. Like I mentioned there, he's 33 years old. But as you can see here, he's going to be 34 years old in September. He's 5'6" with a 71.5-inch reach. He's going to have just over a 1.5-inch reach advantage over Max Holloway in this fight, but Holloway a little bit bigger. We'll get into him in a second. But let's talk about some of the accolades here for Alex Volkanovski. He's a BJJ black belt. He's from City Kickboxing, also trains at Tiger Muay Thai and Freestyle Fighting Gym. He was the former Australian Fighting Championship AFC featherweight champion. He's got Fight of the Night twice for the fights with Chad Mendes and Brian Ortega, and he got Performance of the Night one time for his stoppage win over Chen Sung-jung, the Korean Zombie. Now you look here, Alex Volkanovski did not have an amateur debut. That's pretty common if you've watched enough of these. He made his MMA debut in May of 2012. He made his UFC debut in November of 2016. He fought Yusuke Kasuya in his debut way back when. One interesting thing with Volkanovski that you're not going to see on here, but I went back and looked it up, is the amount of weight classes he's fought in. So for people who might remember or might not, Volkanovski used to play rugby. He used to be as big as a heavyweight, despite being just 5'6". But in MMA, he's fought in 3 different weight classes. He's fought at 170 5 times, fought at welterweight 5 times. He's fought at lightweight 4 times. He's had one catchweight fight at 150. And then obviously being the featherweight champion and being a mainstay at featherweight in the UFC, he's fought 15 times in that weight class. So Volkanovski has fought the most at 145, but also interesting, he's fought in some other weight classes too. He's 11-0 in the UFC. I mean, I don't care what you want to say about who he's fought or whatever. 11-0 in the UFC is extremely impressive. And some of the name, and you know, it just so happens that some of the names on here are very, very, very notable. Let's get into some of those notable wins. Jeremy Kennedy. People don't talk enough about that win. Kennedy was undefeated at the time. That was sort of a prospect versus prospect fight. He went in there and completely dominated Jeremy Kennedy. In fact, I don't think anyone's really dominated Jeremy like that before. Chad Mendes finished him in that fight. That was the fight that led to Chad, retiring shortly after and going into bare knuckle. Jose Aldo defeated him by decision. I don't care what people say. Aldo's still a good fighter. He might be fighting for the bantamweight title here soon. That's a really good win. And then the 2 wins over Max Holloway. We'll dig into that second fight in particular. Very close one, as you can see there, a split decision. But still, to beat Holloway twice, to even just be considered that you beat Holloway twice is extremely impressive considering how great Holloway of a fighter is. The Brian Ortega fight was great as well. Again, a fight where Volk was in a bit of danger. I think in that 3rd round where Ortega had that submission on him. But Volkanovski able to get out, persevere, and get the decision in that one. Great win there. And then finishing Korean Zombie in his last fight, extremely impressive too. And we don't have any losses to talk about with Volkanovski because his one loss was outside the UFC, and it was way back in May of 2013. He got knocked out in the 3rd round against Corey Nelson. I wonder what Corey's up to these days. But yeah, just one of those weird losses that he's had on his resume. But outside of that, he's looked unstoppable. Volkanovski's only had one layoff in his career, and that was the fight from Max Holloway to Brian Ortega. So that was going from the Holloway split decision loss to Ortega. There was about a 441-day layoff in between there. So he fought in July and then didn't end up fighting again until September of the following year. And if you remember, Volkanovski testing positive for COVID. From what I remember, I think he needed some time off for that, but then there was just an issue of getting Ortega booked as well with his injuries. So so it took a bit to book that, but that's the only layoff he's had. If you look at his UFC career since 2017, he's been fighting at least twice a year. So very, very active fight. I mentioned as far as any injuries, he hasn't really had any in the UFC, just the testing positive for COVID, but everyone's pretty much tested positive for COVID these days in life. Forget about the UFC, it doesn't matter. Volkanovski has had 2 close fights. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. He's had one really close fight with Holloway, but I wanted to mention the first fight with Holloway, UFC 245. That was part of that Usman and Covington card. I see a lot of people bringing up that this fight was close. It really wasn't. Not only did I go back and watch the fight, but I went and looked at the media scorecards for that as far as how people scored it. Volkanovski, 19 media members scored the fight for Volkanovski in this win here. Not a single media member scored it for Holloway. So I don't know if it's because the second fight was close that people go back and for some reason think that the first fight was close. It was, and this was extremely decisive. Volkanovski winning this fight. He won the fight and obviously got it done over Holloway. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I do see people talking about how, both those fights with Holloway could have gone either way. No, second fight, sure. First fight, no. Holloway clearly won that fight. Now let's get to the second fight, which was at UFC 251 back in July of 2020. So where are we here? Let's find that win he had over Holloway, the split decision win that he had on that card. So in that fight, very close, like I mentioned, considered one of the best fights of the time, considered one of the best featherweight fights of all time. In that fight, as far as what the media scored, and again, you can find this on MMAdecisions.com, 9 media members scored the fight for Volkanovski, 18 media members scored the fight for Max Holloway. So again, a lot of people felt like Holloway won that second fight. I remember watching it thinking Volkanovski won. You could absolutely make an argument for Max Holloway winning that fight. That's one of those fights that I don't think was a robbery. I think it was very close. Because again, even if you thought Max Holloway won, there are some rounds you have to give Volkanovski in that for sure. So again, extremely close fight. And I think it just shows how high level both of these guys are that a fight is even that close to begin with. So there we go. Okay. Let's get over to Max Holloway. Blessed, former featherweight champ. Let's talk about him. Max Holloway, you can see there, 23-6 record. He's got 10 wins by knockout. He's got 2 submission victories and 11 decisions. He's the number 1 ranked featherweight in the division. Max Holloway, 30 years old, going to be turning 31 in December. He's 5'11" with a 69-inch reach. So not only is Max Holloway 4 years younger than Alex Volkanovski, he's going to have a 5-inch height advantage here. He's 5'11" compared to just 5'6". Therefore, sorry. It's not 5, is it? 5, 6 is 11. Yeah, actually, sorry, it is. Yeah, 5-inch height advantage. For a second there, I thought I got my math wrong, which tends to happen a lot on these things. I get my math wrong. So yeah, there you go. Holloway, 4 years younger, 5-inch height advantage. Holloway is a BJJ brown belt. He's got fight of the night 5 times against Jose Aldo, Brian Ortega, Dustin Poirier, Calvin Kattar, and Yair Rodriguez. He's got performance of the night 4 times for his wins over Akira Corisani, Cub Swanson, Anthony Pettis, and Brian Ortega. He's got knockout of the night 1 time when he knocked out Will Chope. He's the first American to win the UFC Featherweight Championship. He's tied for 3rd longest winning streak in UFC history at 13. And listen to some of this company he shares that with: John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, George St. Pierre, and Habib Nurmagomedov. And also in the win he had over Calvin Kattar, which you remember, complete beatdown. He had the most significant strikes attempted in a fight in UFC history with 744 attempted strikes. That's crazy. So that was, again, a fight that Holloway really sort of separated himself from the rest of the division with that performance. Calvin Kattar's lost before. He's never lost that badly. That was a really, really good win there for Max Holloway. So just wanted to point out those little kind of extra stats with Max Holloway that obviously has a lot of accolades aside from being the former featherweight champion. Now, Max Holloway made his amateur debut in, as you can see here, November 2006. He lost to a guy by the name of Aaron Lynch. Never heard of him, but interesting that Holloway made his debut on the Ohio regional scene of all places. Figured maybe it would have been in Hawaii. Max Holloway made his MMA debut, his official debut, in September of 2010. Had a kickboxing fight, though, before that in 2008. Max Holloway then made his UFC debut in February of 2012, which is interesting because, you think now, how many guys with just, 4 fights get called to the UFC? It doesn't really happen that often. Usually you have to go in Contender Series or through LFA. So he gets 4 wins, I should say, and then gets signed to the UFC. And guess what? By the way, you're going to have to fight Dustin Poirier, future interim champ, future one of the best fighters in MMA. So that was a tough fight to have in your debut. That was at UFC 143, the Diaz and Condit card, which is pretty crazy going back and watching that card. Remember how good that fight was with Diaz and Condit, and then just to think you have this future contenders fight between Poirier and Max Holloway. So there we go. Like Volkanovski, Max Holloway's also fought in multiple weight classes. He's fought at lightweight 5 times. He had a 149-pound catchweight fight against Clay Collard, who's in PFL now. And the reason that was a catchweight, I went back and looked it up. It's because Holloway, I think, was supposed to fight Mirsad Bektic. That fight ended up not happening, so Clay Collard stepped in, and I think just with the short notice, they made it 149. Like, no one missed weight in that fight. It was just that, they wanted to make sure that both guys could actually hit the scales properly with the short notice and everything. And then Holloway has fought 23 times at featherweight. So not the quite the same as Volkanovski, who's fought as high as welterweight, but Holloway still has fought in multiple weight classes, like I said there. Look at this UFC record. Max Holloway's UFC record is 19-6. He's got 11 stoppage wins. One thing I always point out, and I always use this example when people, because fans are pretty harsh when it comes to fighters, young fighter loses a fight or two, people are like, oh, they're done. They're going to go to Bellator, they're going to go to the regional scene, whatever. Check this out. And granted, it doesn't get much tougher competition than this, but if you look at it here, clear as day, Max Holloway started his UFC career 3-3. I think a lot of people forget that. Now, granted, he's fighting Poirier and McGregor in that bunch, and the Bermudez fight, we'll talk about that a little bit later. That was an extremely close fight with it being a split decision loss. But still, I always remind people, if you see, a young fighter going 3-3 in the UFC or has a couple losses, don't think it's the be-all end-all, because Max Holloway's proof here. He was 3-3. Think after those back-to-back losses, I mean, I'm sure there was people at the time maybe writing him off, and here he is, becoming a featherweight champion, getting 2 wins over Jose Aldo. That's why I always tell people, don't focus so much on the wins and losses, especially if a fighter's young, because they can always turn it around here. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, as far as notable wins, Max Holloway has a ton here. Andre Fili, which at the time was like a prospect matchup, really, really good win there. Cub Swanson submitting him in that fight. Cub's a guy that's still hanging around. Charles Oliveira, the current lightweight champion, I think people forget. Holloway has a win over him. Granted, it was a neck and shoulder injury, but still, a win is a win. Jeremy Stevens, good win there. Anthony Pettis, the former lightweight champion. Jose Aldo twice, and finishing Aldo twice. No one's done that to Aldo as far as finishing him 2 times. McGregor obviously finished him at 145, but for Holloway to finish him twice, almost nearly identical times too. Look at this, 413 round 3, 451 round 3, pretty crazy. And those were back-to-back fights. So those wins are good considering that Aldo's still competing at a high level. Brian Ortega, I mean, no one's beat Ortega like that. That was a really big beat down there. And that was the fight, of course, that, made Ortega take some time off, improve his striking. So that was a really dominant win. That was like, that fight could have been stopped earlier too with the way Holloway was teeing off on him. Frankie Edgar, good win there, former lightweight champ. Calvin Kattar, like I said, that fight should have been stopped earlier with the amount of damage that Kattar was taking. And no one's done that to Kattar since. So that was a really good win. And then, of course, his last fight against Yair Rodriguez. I know he was a big favorite going in, but still, Rodriguez still a talented guy in that weight class. Now, a couple of his notable losses here. Dustin Poirier, like I mentioned there, that was a notable loss. Dennis Bermudez was a loss too. Conor McGregor. Dustin Poirier. So he's lost twice to Dustin Poirier, one at featherweight, one at lightweight. And then he's lost twice to Volkanovski. But there's a couple close fights in here, which we might as well get into right now. So I went back and looked. The Holloway win over Leonard Garcia, which you see here was a split decision win. I actually didn't know this. That was at UFC 155 back in December of 2012. Only 2 media members scored the fight for Max Holloway. 7 scored it for Leonard Garcia, and 1 scored it a draw. So the majority felt like Holloway shouldn't have won that fight. However, you look at his loss to Dennis Bermudez here, UFC 160 back in May of 2013. Not a single media member scored the fight for Dennis Bermudez. So that's pretty bad. I mean, the fact that it went... not a single media member felt like he won. Split decision loss, like I said there, but check this out. 11 media members scoring the fight for Max Holloway. So say what you want about the Garcia fight. The Bermudez fight should have gone his way at the very least. Now, that second fight with Alex Volkanovski, split decision. Like I mentioned there, 9 media members scoring the fight for Volkanovski, 18 scoring it for Holloway. So again, most people felt like Holloway should have got the nod in that one. So a lot of pressure with Volkanovski, with Holloway, I should say, going into the trilogy, because he needs to win this. If he doesn't, he's probably not going to get another opportunity. So really big fight there. Now back to Holloway's, as far as his layoffs and things of that nature. He's only had 2 layoffs in his career. So going from Jose Aldo to Brian Ortega, Max Holloway had a 371-day layoff, and then going from actually this Yair Rodriguez fight to Volkanovski, he's going to have a 231-day layoff. Again, not major, but Holloway's been pretty active throughout his career, but like I said, just a few little things there that have kept him out. However, I did want to go back and look at some of the injuries that that Volkanovski, that Holloway's had. Why am I saying the wrong name? My bad. So yeah, some of the injuries that Holloway has suffered here. So if you look back in March of 2018, Max Holloway was supposed to initially fight Frankie Edgar back then. You can see here. Holloway had a leg injury that took him out of that fight. Then he was supposed to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov in April of that year. But if you remember, the NYSAC deemed that it was too risky of a weight cut for Max Holloway. It wasn't an injury, but he obviously attempted to make the weight and wasn't going to be making it. And that was at 155, remember? That wasn't a 145-pound fight. So Holloway, I think it just goes to tell you how big this guy is in between camps. If he can't even make 155 on short notice, he must be pretty big. And then the Brian Ortega fight, if you remember, was supposed to take place later that same year, at UFC 226. I remember when that all happened. I was actually there for Fight Week for the Miocic and Cormier card. And I remember Holloway doing that interview, and he was kind of lackluster, and he did that TV. If you watch it, I'm sure you can find it. Just look up 226 Fight Week. And Holloway does this interview, and he seemed really tired and kind of out of it. And of course, people were concerned. And then, of course, they find out that Holloway was having concussion-like symptoms. So they pulled him from that card. And I think people forget about that, because I remember at the time people are like, should Holloway even be cutting to 45 anymore? Like, because he's had some really tough cuts, and, having to cut the weight for Khabib, and, Holloway does take a decent amount of damage in his fights. Some people felt like, where does Max Holloway's career go from here if he, is trying to get this fight and he's having some concussion issues? So there was that side of things there. So that's another little tidbit I thought I'd mention. And then he was supposed to fight Yair Rodriguez, if you remember, in July of last year. He had an injury there, undisclosed. And then he was supposed to fight Volkanovski back in March of this year at UFC 272 on the Covington Masvidal card. He had an injury there. Although that whole thing was weird, right? Because he gets injured, they pull him from the card. They then book Korean Zombie and Volkanovski just a few months later. And then Holloway's like, yeah, the injury's not that bad. I might actually be able to take that fight. I could be a backup for that fight with Zombie and Volkanovski. And of course, that didn't end up happening. And I think Volkanovski was like, no, I'm not going to fight. If Zombie's out of this fight, I'm not going to fight Max Holloway on short notice. So I remember him telling me that in an interview. So yeah, that didn't end up happening either. So again, from like I said, from going from Rodriguez to Volkanovski will be a 231-day layoff. So yeah, we talked about the close fights. Let's talk about the betting odds right now. So you see a lot of bookmakers having Volkanovski as the favorite, close to -200, about -195, -190. Holloway the underdog here at plus money. So that's what the odds makers are saying right now at the time we're recording this, which is on June 11th. This is when I'm recording this, so we're just less than a month out from fight time. Let me get to my pick on this fight. So I think you're going to see another close fight like the second fight. I think both these guys have proven time and time again that they are the two best featherweights in the world. That includes Bellator, that includes other promotions. I think they are the two best in the world right now. I think there's guys that are closely behind, like I think a Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen, all these guys, Josh Emmett. I think they're all slightly behind where Volkanovski and Holloway are. That's my opinion. I think Holloway and Volkanovski are in their own class. And I think you're seeing that by some of the wins that they've had. Maybe I'd put Ortega in that category too. I think if Ortega fought Holloway again, it would be a much closer fight because of that improved stand-up, like I said. So just keeping that in mind, these, in my opinion, are the two best. So for that reason, I think this will be a close fight again. Now, we know something about Volkanovski, and that is he's extremely tough to finish. Now, Max Holloway is not really a power puncher. He's a volume puncher. Like, you don't see Max Holloway getting like first round finishes, right? I know there's a few that I referenced there in some of the wins that he's had, but he's not like a power puncher the same way like a Josh Emmett is, or an Arnold Allen is, like we saw in his last fight against Dan Hooker. Holloway's not really that guy. He's a volume guy. And, to be honest, like I said, in that Calvin Kattar fight that Holloway had, there were times that they could have stopped the fight. So Holloway can certainly lay the amount of strikes on you to get you that TKO finish, but he's not a guy that's going to I'd be very shocked, for example, if Holloway went out there and got like a one-punch knockout over Volkanovski. I don't think that happens. Is Max Holloway submitting Alex Volkanovski? I don't think so. I think Brian Ortega has a better ground game than Max Holloway does, at least from what we've seen. And if he can't submit Volkanovski, because he had that choke in pretty tight, I don't think Max Holloway is going to submit him there either. So I personally think this fight's going to go the distance. How do I see it going down? I see Volkanovski getting his hand raised. I think this is going to be really close, like the second fight, although I think it'll be a little bit more decisive here for Volkanovski. I just think he's a tough puzzle to figure out. And like I said, I don't see him getting knocked out. I don't see him getting submitted. So if it goes to the scorecards, I know there's some school of thought out there that, if you're the champion, you got to beat the champion. Or sorry, if you're the champion, the challenger has to beat the champion. We've seen plenty of examples of this. Dominic Reyes, John Jones, fights where, despite the champ or the challenger having some success, maybe early or later in the fight, people tend to favor the champion more. So keeping that in mind, if we know it's going to be a close fight, the judges are probably going to go more towards the champion. I think, and I know Volkanovski finished Korean Zombie in his last fight. He's not finishing Max Holloway. Holloway's never been finished in his career. Volkanovski has, but again, it was so long ago. I don't think there's any evidence of Volkanovski, leaning towards getting finished in this fight. So That's it. My prediction, I think, will be an Alex Volkanovski decision win, close like the last one, but I think it'll be even more decisive for Volkanovski, where there won't be this robbery or anything like that. I just think Volkanovski's going to keep this on the feet. He's going to move in and out. I think Holloway's going to try his best to, inflict some damage there on Volk, but I don't see it happening. I think Volk's going to take another decision there. If you want to play this fight safe, I think the fight goes the distance prop is probably your best bet. That way, if you're on the Holloway side, you're not worried about getting robbed, or vice versa. If Holloway happens to squeak this one out over Volkanovski, you're not worrying about that. I don't think the odds, they might have them right now if they have the fight goes the decision prop. Fight goes to the decision is -185. I think that's worth a bet right now. And in fact, I would recommend maybe locking that in now, because I don't think we'll see a finish here. And it is getting close to almost 2-1 odds, but you could parlay that with, something else that you might like there too. So that would be my bet on this fight, is fight goes the distance, but my pick will be Alex Volkanovski by decision. Let me know what you think in the comments. Who are you favoring here? You going with Max Blessed Holloway? You going with Volkanovski? Let me know. More than happy to talk about this fight with you guys, as long as you guys are going to be cool about it. Not, don't write stuff like you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about, all that. That's not going to get anywhere with me. Let's have a nice civil discussion about this fight. There might be some stuff I made mistakes on. There might be stuff you don't agree with me with. I'm fine with that. Let's talk about this fight. It's really interesting. And also going to be lucky enough to cover this one in person in a few weeks. I'm going to be going down to cover that entire card, UFC 276. One last time, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. I'm James Lynch. If there's any other fights you guys want me to preview in the coming weeks, that's coming up here soon, just know that, most of the main events, all the title fights like that, I will be previewing. But maybe there's another fight that sticks out. For example, I did the Anil Magny and Shavkat Rakhmonov fight, which I know some people wanted me to break down. Fights like that, if there's any ones that you want me to do, let me know in the comments here. So thanks so much for watching. A bit of a longer breakdown today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys soon.